Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today is another episode of reviewing NHL teams so far. As today, we got the St. Louis Blues as they went through a pretty decent offseason, I guess. They lost Alex Pietrangelo, they brought in Tory Krug, they re-signed Marco Scandella. They had a bit of a weird offseason to say the least. A little bit of regression, but also a lot of improvements throughout the entire squad to where this team could potentially be maybe a contender, but who knows. So let's get right into it. As today we're going to be having Perlo Wisdom and Steel Flies for the first time. He will be joining us as well, as we're going to be interviewing them on how they think about the St. Louis Blues. All their links will be down in the description below if you want to check them out. Steel Flyers has a whole big website that is going and it's ever growing. I am part of it and I'm really excited to be part of it. So go check out that Steel Flyers website down below. Also, before we get into talking about the St. Louis Blues, I'd like to just say if you are new to the channel, make sure to slap that subscribe button and hit that like button as well. So let's get into talking about the St. Louis Blues. As last year, they got kicked out in the first round by the Vancouver Canucks, and they were just outmatched by Vancouver. Vancouver was a really good team. They did great in the regular season. No, they were on top of the division. They were one of the better teams. And honestly, I like what they did this offseason. They got Jake Neighbors in the draft, which I think really good player from Airdrie. He's a smaller guy, 6 foot, 195 pounds. He's a little bit of a bigger boy, but he puts up the points. He really does. He showed that he could score some goals. He shows that he could pass the puck pretty well, and I think Jake Neighbors will be a pretty decent player for the St. Louis Blues as a prospect, and especially since the St. Louis Blues really doesn't have like a prospect system, like a real deep prospect system. I mean, they got some nice guys, but nothing that is really like standing out. And Jake Neighbors does help that core, I guess, develop. He's not a standout guy, but he's going to help them a little bit out, especially since they traded away Dominic Bach, their other first round pick that they traded to Carolina to, of course, pick up Justin Falk. Trades-wise, they traded away Jake Allen to the Montreal Canadiens, which leaves a big question open for the St. Louis Blues, is what are they going to do for their goaltending? They're going to be having Binnington and Husso. Husso has never played a single game in the NHL, while Binnington had a bit of a struggle in the playoffs there against the Vancouver Canucks, and he's going to be having to be relied on a lot this season, especially in this quick 56-game schedule, where last year he did do decently good in the regular season, but absolutely got demolished in the playoffs against the Vancouver Canucks. And maybe it was just because of dysfunctionality. Maybe Pietrangelo rumors were taking over the team and they just kind of fell apart. And I think that's what really happened in St. Louis. It was a team breakdown against the Vancouver Canucks. Every one of their players struggled against the Vancouver Canucks. They weren't playing very well. That's why they got kicked out in 6 games. Binnington did do not bad in some games, but he did definitely lit in a lot of soft ones. And it is a big loss. Jake Allen is a very good goalie. He is off and on at some moments of time, but he did play huge for them last year, especially going into that Vancouver series. He played very well in the playoffs. So, honestly, it's kind of a bummer that they did lose Jake Allen, but with how much he is, he's an expensive backup for sure at $4.35 million and is a lot going towards Montreal. They need a salary cap. They really badly need to, and they used it to sign a ton of players. As they got in the re-sign stage, they got Marco Scandella back to a little bit of a steep contract for 4 years at $3.275 million. I felt like it was a steep contract, but you bring in a nice defensive defenseman to kind of help you guys out. You need some bigger defensemen, and this core is a menacing core. You got Bertuzzo, you got Scandella, and now you got Parayko. And I think Scandella might complement Justin Falk or Vince Dunn, whoever's going to play alongside of those guys, because I believe Vince Dunn is a top 4 guy once they get him back in lineup. It is rumored that they should be signing Vince Dunn to a contract here soon. And Vince Dunn's analytics is great. He put up some great stats for the St. Louis Blues last year. 23 points, a plus and minus of 15. He is a really good defenseman for the St. Louis Blues. Especially, this could be a guy that could take over for an Alex Pietrangelo. That's how good his analytics look. Defensively, they got Sammy Blatt back onto a contract as well, 1.5 for the next 2 years. And then the big signing, Tory Krug, that kind of announced that they're not going to be getting Pietrangelo back to a 7-year, $6.5 million deal. And I think Tory Krug, honestly, is on the same level as Pietrangelo, but he is more offensive. He's definitely not as great of a defender as Alex Pietrangelo is. But for how nice of a contract you got for Tory Krug at $6.5 million when you paid $8.8 for Pietrangelo, I think is a great deal for St. Louis. And you got to remember, this team is always about the cheap contracts. Their most expensive contract is O'Reilly and Tarasenko at $7.5 million. They love their cheap contracts, and that's what they focus on here in St. Louis. And it's a great way to go about things. And then also they got Kyle Clifford for 1 year and Steven Stantini, which builds up that depth for the St. Louis Blues, especially in a year where it's a shortened year. A lot of games going to be coming right at you. So building that depth is going to be very important for St. Louis. Last but not least, they also brought in Mike Hoffman. It's rumored that he will be signing there for $4 million for the next year. They're just waiting on the LTIR stuff. So Mike Hoffman also adds some offensive ability and makes that top six a more lethal top six, especially if you're going to be getting Tarasenko in mid-February. Mike Hoffman will help you guys produce more offense, especially with Tarasenko out of the lineup. Once Tarasenko gets back in, and hopefully he'll be back to a full bill of health, this St. Louis Blues team could potentially look very scary. I'm going to give this team a B+. It sucks that you lost your big captain in Pietrangelo. It was horrible asset management. If you didn't bring in Justin Falk and Scandella, you would have been able to get back Pietrangelo onto a deal. You might have been able to even bring in Scandella. But I think losing Pietrangelo is a big loss, especially he was the team captain. He was a guy that St. Louis built around for years, and now you lost him. It's going to be a big bummer. I don't know how it's going to affect the locker room, if they're going to be able to recuperate from the loss with Tory Krug being added to the lineup. We will have to see, but let's head off to the interview with Steel Flyers and also with Steel Flyers and Pearl of Wisdom. So let's head off to that interview. It's very exciting as my camera just died on me, so let's head off to that interview. Hello, everyone, as we are off to the interview part of the show with the St. Louis Blues review. And for the first time, I got Steel Flyers on the show alongside of Perlo Wisdom. All their links will be down in the description below. They're amazing people. Steel Flyers has his own website, and Perlo, he has his YouTube channel, and also Steel Flyers has a YouTube channel as well. So the links will be all down in the description below. So, how's your guys' days going? We'll start off with Perlo. How's your day going?
Going good, man. Watching a little bit of U.S. Czech right now. Hockey all the time here in Perlo land. You know what it is.
Hell yeah, I'm so happy to have hockey back. And Steel, how you doing?
Doing the same. I'm watching, enjoying some hockey. Finally, getting some hockey back. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure and a privilege to be with the pros and the nos, and you guys, man, for sure. Peyton on the radio and Perla Wisdom, man. You guys are the best, man. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for being on the show. It's awesome to have you. So let's get right into talking about the St. Louis Blues offseason and get into some details. As we'll talk about the draft first up. We know that Doug Armstrong, the St. Louis Blues, has always had a good draft. They've been drafting really good. Robert Thomas, for example, being one of their better players. Samuel Blah. Vince Dunn. They have had a lot of good draft picks throughout the years, and this year they got a Edmonton Oil King and Jake Neighbors. We'll start it off with Perlo. What do you think of Jake Neighbors, and will he develop into a decent player for the St. Louis Blues?
He could be. It's the thing about Jake Neighbors is it's very likely he's going to play. It's just how much is he gonna? His high side and low side is like so huge. He could be just your 13th forward and play on the power play or play on the penalty kill in the power play and stuff like that. Or he could be your second line center. It's really hard to put a spot on how much upside he has up until now. He was sort of a wild card for me. I wasn't sure. I could have saw him going as high as like 19th, and I could have saw him go in the second round. So I think it was a good pick. It was a good gamble. He's like average at just about everything, but very, very smart. And that's why I just think he's going to find a way to play in the league because of his intelligence level. His actual skills are probably average across the board, but and he's even got average size, 6 foot and 95. So I think he's going to play. It's a very safe pick as far as whether he'll play in the league or not. My inkling it is high. He's somewhere around a third liner that can pot a couple for you type thing. Not a bad play at all. Not a bad play at all.
Yeah, and I like the move because Jake Neighbors, he's a little bit of a goal scorer. I think that could help out St. Louis because right now they're a very, very defensive team. They got a lot of guys that are kind of built around for their defense core. We'll move on to the goaltending now as they made a bit of a trade. They sent Jake Allen off to the Montreal Canadiens for in return a third and a seventh. We'll send this off to Steele. How do you think of the move, and do you think Jordan Binnington will be able to carry the load that he's going to be carrying in this upcoming season, especially with a lot of back-to-backs? So
Oh boy, it's
take
going
her
to be
away.
interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be tough because when we were talking about this even before we got on, if he plays like he did last year, I think they're going to be a little bit in trouble. He needs to play like he did when they won the Stanley Cup in 2018-19. Okay. If he is able to do that, and then if you're able to get a little bit of backup play, and you might even have to bring Joel in, because you're going to have to carry at least three goalies,
Hmm.
right? So I don't think he's going to be asked to take the he's going to be asked to take the bulk of the load, but I think it's going to be spread out a little bit, especially for him, especially if he comes out of the gate in the first 10 games, okay, and is able to play really, really well, like he's able to get back to that form like he was, then I think you're going to see him carry the load. But if he falters a little bit, you might see Berube switch him out. You know what I mean? But I do think it's a good move, though. I do think it's a good move.
Yeah, they cleared up a lot of cap space. They made some room for maybe Billy Husso to kind of jump into that spot. Who knows? But Binnington's gonna have a lot of load, and we've been seeing with a lot of teams going with these tandems, and now which we haven't really seen very much in the NHL. And this year was kind of a year where it proved that having two goalies that are capable of starting is very, very useful. So we'll have to see how everything works out for the St. Louis Blues on that part. Now, Perlo, I'm gonna send this off to you. Do you believe that Jordan Binnington can rebound from kind of the rough playoff that he had? And also, how do you think of Ville Husso? Do you think he will be able to take that backup role for Jordan Binnington?
Well, they obviously believe in Husso, unless they have plans that I'm not aware of to find a goaltender somewhere else. But I don't know where they get it from because his AHL numbers haven't, haven't been that great. And maybe the team at the time wasn't that great defensively. I'm not going to even pretend that I know that. I didn't follow the AHL close enough. So he's 25. It was about time that they need to either give him a shot or not. So I suppose that's the way they look at it. The thing is like Jordan Binnington really didn't have his best year last year. He's now 27 and was a late bloomer himself. The other thing about Jordan Binnington and when they traded Allen away, Allen on his way out kind of did like a backhanded kind of comment and said it's going to be nice to play with a professional like Price, which kind of gives you the indication that maybe he didn't think Jordan Binnington was as much professional as there were some difficulties there. And there has been a lot of talk about Jordan Binnington's attitude being arrogant and all of those sort of things like that. Now, with arrogant goaltenders, there has been goaltenders that have come in and been very arrogant, and that's fueled them to do well, and then they got knocked down, like Jordan did last year. So the question is, does Jordan humble himself and come back with a more what's the word I would say? Professional would be a better
team
yeah,
attitude.
team attitude, mature attitude
Yeah, there you go.
now here, because he's got the tools. If that does happen, and maybe they know something about Ville Husso that we don't know. Maybe he's great with young kids. With maybe he's great with people like that. Maybe he's got a personality that can help Binnington out and stuff like that, and work with. They're going off something like that. That's possible. I know that St. Louis hasn't made too many mistakes in the last 10 years. So they've built their team very, very well. They've drafted well, as you already mentioned. They've kept this team in contention for a very long time and actually won a cup. So I'm going to give them a little bit of credit here and say that they know what they're doing. But from my perspective right now, I'm worried because if Jordan Binnington doesn't pan out, this season could crumble pretty fast.
It could with Binnington. Like I think maybe it was just like the Stanley Cup hangover for him. It was his first year in the NHL. You have this much success and it's coming so easy to you, and then next year you're faced with adversity and you don't take it very well. So now it's a do or die season for Binnington. Do you bounce back? And he's on his last year of his deal. So it's either you bounce back for the St. Louis Blues or you will probably fall down to the free agency. And St. Louis will look towards
Yeah.
other options.
Yeah.
So it is a boom or bust season for Jordan Binnington. And I think he will be able to face that adversity and potentially bounce back. But that's dependent on how well their defensive core plays out. They lost Alex Pietrangelo last year. They re-signed Scandella back to a 4-year deal, and Blatt as well. So we'll send this off to Steele. How do you think of the Marco Scandella deal, and was that sort of a sign to come that Pietrangelo was most likely not coming back to St. Louis?
I think it was, but I also think that I'm going to bring up a name here that I think is also going to maybe lighten the load of Pietrangelo leaving, and that's going to be Scott Peronovich. Okay, and he's a pretty decent prospect coming in, 22 years old, and he signed his contract to be on. And Vince Dunn has he signed?
No, he is not
Okay,
signed just yet.
So with them bringing in Marco, I think they needed to do something because Pietrangelo left a huge hole, and then they haven't signed Vince yet, and then they're bringing in Scott. So it's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic is going to work. I think they had to bring that in because I think they knew that Pietrangelo was going to be going somewhere else. You know what I mean? And so they had to do something. And it wasn't a bad deal. It really wasn't a bad deal. It's 3.2 million. It's not, over the top money per se. I mean, he's 30. Not a bad deal, But I think with what their prospect coming in, and then I think that also is going to kind of help lighten the load of the loss of Pietrangelo. But I think that was a good deal bringing in Marco. Yeah.
So we'll get on to the big move, the replacement for Alex Pietrangelo and Torrey Krug. And man, was this ever weird, to say the least. A guy who absolutely laid out Robert Thomas in the playoffs. That beautiful hit where Torrey Krug flew down the ice and absolutely laid out Robert Thomas. Big playoff moment. And now he's going to be going to St. Louis. So, Perlo, what do you think of the move of Torrey Krug signing in St. Louis for a 7-year, $6.5 million deal? Give us your thoughts, and how do you think it'll improve the St. Louis Blues, and will it maybe help their offensive core out?
Is it going to improve over Pietrangelo? You're right. It was definitely weird. I didn't see it coming. That's for sure. I kind of makes sense because they get to have Tory Krug at 6.5, where it was going to cost them what, 9 for Pietrangelo, and
Yeah.
it saved them 3.5 million. Torrey Krug is a very underrated defenseman.
Yes.
I wouldn't put him that much lower than Pietrangelo as far as overall game is concerned. In certain aspects of Torrey's game, he's actually better than Pietrangelo. It's just the physical aspect that's not there. But they've got Colton Parayko, and they're, like you said, they're putting a lot of faith in Marco Scandella here to be able to play, to take up a lot of the slack that Pietrangelo had. They've got Carl Gunnarsson, Robert Bertuzzo, and the big one for me is Vince Dunn. They obviously believe big time in Vince Dunn, that he can
Mm-hmm.
play a huge top 4 role, and that Justin Falk is going to rebound after he had a very difficult season, which is understandable, actually. Imagine getting traded to a team who is trying to sign their captain, and you get signed to a $6.5 million deal, which basically spells Pietrangelo not getting re-signed again. Like everybody, if you want to talk about elephant in the room, so here you are, the new guy. Hi, I'm making sure Pietrangelo doesn't come back. How awkward is that? St. Louis has made St. Louis has never been afraid to make moves for the future, even if it's going to affect the now. They do it a lot, and they thought that Pietrangelo at 9 million was just going to be too much in the long run. They're a team that wants to be competitive every single year and believes that these kind of contracts like Pietrangelo got in the long term is going to make it so you have to do a rebuild. They don't want to afford a rebuild. They don't believe they can afford a rebuild. So they do moves like this that keep them in all the time. I understand it, but sometimes it gets really awkward. And this is one of those times where maybe Justin Folk will have a better season now that the whole everything is kind of done now. Pietangelo's gone, and he can find his own niche. It's a very remember when they traded Stepniak like just before the playoffs for picks, and even at that time Braden Shen even publicly went, great, we're just about to make the playoffs and they trade our best defenseman. They are not afraid to trade assets, players away to get assets, so they don't sign guys for really long contracts so they can be relevant every single year. And I don't know if you agree or disagree with it, but it seems to have worked with them not bad so far. And that seems to be what happened here.
Yeah, their defense core right now, I honestly, I gotta say, it looks really solid if you had Vince Dunn. Vince Dunn's analytics look really, really good, and he could potentially jump up into that top 2, top 4 role. Now, he was just playing the third pair role, so maybe these analytics that he does have, maybe it's overvalued because he only played on the third pair alongside a Scandella, whoever, right? So we'll have to honestly see how he jumps up into the play. And Tory Krug, he is like a lesser valued Alex Pietrangelo who can't play defense, but he could distribute offense a lot. And that's something that St. Louis needs. They need more offense in their team. They're definitely a defense focused team, which they pick up Kyle Clifford, getting him to a 2-year, $1 million deal. And we'll send this off to Steele. This was their last move. And Kyle Clifford is maybe brought in there for some veteran leadership. The team kind of fell apart last year, and maybe they're looking for a little bit more physicality. What do you think of the Kyle Clifford moving forward with this year?
I think you hit it right on the head. I think it's going to be more for his physicality. 6'2", 211 pounds. Look, he's not going to be that guy that's going to, get you 60 points, or, that's not why they brought him in, I don't think. You know what I mean? So he didn't sign for big money. He signed for 1 million. You know what I mean? And I think that it was a good move, and I think it's going to, I do agree with you exactly, because of he brings that presence into the room, and he's going to be more of a help bring the team together kind of kind of a player. You know what I mean? I think he's going to provide more of that veteran leadership where Pietrangelo was the captain. He's gone, even though they've named a new captain, but you still have that core leadership group. And I think he's going to be one of those guys. It's going to be one of those core leadership group guys where, he might not have the letter on his sweater, but he's one of them guys that might, speak up a little bit more and say things a little bit more to players and, kind of whip them into shape a little bit more. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's won cups before, and he's a veteran guy. And you know what? We forgot about one other player, and that is Mr. Mike Hoffman, who signed a professional tryout contract with the St. Louis Blues. Now, we've been hearing reports that he might be signed there for a good $3-4 million. We don't know what exactly is going to happen yet. But if Mike Hoffman signs with the St. Louis Blues, we'll send this one off to Steele again. We'll send it off to both of you guys, but Steele, we'll start off with you. What do you think of the Mike Hoffman move, kind of replacing Tarasenko a bit, because he won't be back until around February with that shoulder injury and maybe even further. So getting Mike Hoffman, what do you think of Mike Hoffman maybe joining the St. Louis Blues?
Well, for one, I think he's going to make the team. I think this is basically a formality because of St. Louis's cap space situation right now. Until they can officially have Tarasenko be put on IR and his money not count against the cap space, and until they get everything worked out with Alexandra Steen, that's $13.2 million is going to come off the books for St. Louis. And I think that's going to allow them to sign Vince Dunn. Okay. And it's going to afford them the opportunity to sign Mike Hoffman to something like 3-4 mil, whatever. They got rid of Pietrangelo, but they ended up now with Mike Hoffman coming aboard. They are going to end up with 3 players that all day are way better than Pietrangelo all day. Those 3 players that they're going to bring in. So I have to agree with Perlo. I like everything that St. Louis has been doing. They have been a team that's stayed relevant the entire time. And look, the biggest contract on their team is O'Reilly at $7.5 million. Okay. That's the biggest contract on the team right now, okay, other than Vladimir, which is the same, 7.5, right? They signed Torrey Krug and Falk both at 6.5. They're not giving these guys those max contracts like what Perlo was saying, because that's what happens when you give these guys these max contracts, $8, $9, $10 million a year, and you get them out there 4 or 5 years down the road. Now you can't do anything if something's going on with your team, if you need to make trades or whatever, because now you're locked into these big, long contracts. So I think this is going to bode well for St. Louis all the way around.
And we'll send it off to Perlo on your thoughts on the Mike Hoffman maybe getting signed to St. Louis.
Well, it's always nice to have high percentage shooters on your team. And from what I understand, it's looking like a 1-year, $4.5 million deal. So they gives them options whether they want to re-sign him next year or if Tarasenko's okay. It gives Hoffman a chance to get some playoff hockey time, probably with St. Louis, which he hasn't had much in his career, and build up his value as a player. So it's a good deal. When you think about St. Louis, you think about a team that, like you said, plays very defensive. It's a defensive-minded team. They've got great two-way centers in Shen and, of course, O'Reilly, Selke Trophy caliber in O'Reilly. But they really only had one percentage shooter besides Tarasenko, who they don't have, and now in David Perron. David Perron was a good high percentage shooter. Now you've got Hoffman, who may be one of the best high percentage shooters in the league. And when you play a defensive system like them, it is really good to have those guys. We've seen it with Philadelphia We saw with Philadelphia last year, and in some cases with the Islanders, who also play a very defensive system, or even Columbus. If you don't have those guys, it's hard to win.
I mean, even Tampa Bay too.
Yeah. So if you don't have those guys that can score when everything isn't looking like you're going to be able to do that, if you're playing on back on your heels, and all of a sudden you have a guy like Hoffman who can just shoot from the hash marks and pick the corner, that is huge to have. So I think it's a good move. I think it's a good move for everybody involved, especially if it's only a 1-year deal. And considering the fact that they don't have Tarasenko there, I don't think they had too many other options but to try to find somebody like that.
All right, so that is pretty much it for all the St. Louis moves. They have had a pretty good offseason, I would think, after replacing Pietrangelo. So let's get on to our final thoughts and the gradings for the St. Louis Blues on their offseason. So we'll start off with Perlo. What's your grade on their offseason and your final thoughts on the team?
Yeah, St. Louis is like, after everything I said, it's the grading is St. Louis stuck to their plan. I'm going to give them that of not giving long contracts to somebody like Pietrangelo. Okay, I don't know if it's the right move or not. From what I hear in the room, like I heard from people that really are people that I respect, that they can't afford to lose them. They can't afford to lose them. They can't afford to lose them. I'm going to give them a B+ for balls, for sticking to their plan and not listening to the noise and doing what they say, what they believe, and sticking with their organizational philosophy all the way through. And because of that, I'm going to give them high marks. And bringing Hoffman, I'm going to give them the B+ on that. I almost want to give a B because I'm still concerned about the goaltending with Binnington. But even after they sign Hoffman, I think there's room there to find a goaltender out there. So I think it's possible. I just can't see them going with a guy from the minors as a backup to this kid that only had a .906 last year in the AHL. I have a feeling they got a plan for another goaltender out there. So.
All right, and we'll send it off to Steele with his grading and his final thoughts.
Well, gosh, I've never really graded a team on what their off-season moves were, but based off of everything that they've done, I would have to agree, and I would actually go a little bit higher and say an A- because I like what they've done in the last 2 years in the draft. And some of those players are now going to start to come to fruition now. You know what I mean? Like, I'm really interested to see that Scott Peronovich. I want to see what he looks like. I'm 22 years old. I'm coming out of college this year, signing his contract to be on the pros. I think he's going to find a little bit more ice time than maybe people think. Okay. And so I'll say an A- just so I can be different since I've never really graded it. But I am going to say this. Yes, they stuck to their guns and Perlo gave him a B for balls. Okay, but I don't think that St. Louis is going to necessarily be the same team that they were last year, obviously, because they've had a lot of turnover. Okay. And so, yes, on paper, they've made some really shrewd moves and they made some really good things. And I'm giving them an A-. We'll see if they can put it together for the season.
Yeah, I think honestly that Scott kid, he was looking sick in the NCAA. A very offensive guy, looks really well.
Oh man.
So he's sick. And honestly, I agree with both of you guys. I would probably put this team around a B+ because of the fact that I think they brought in a lot of good players. I think getting in Tory Krug to kind of replace Pietrangelo is good. Doesn't replace the leadership that Pietrangelo brought in, but when you add Clifford and Hoffman back into the team, it evens everything out. So thank you guys very much for reading on the show. Make sure to go check out steelflyers.com. All the links will be down in the description for Steel Flyers, and same with Parallel Wisdom. Thank you guys very much for watching, and we'll see you guys all later. Adios, amigos.